And we have an amazing guest for today. I'm excited to introduce our second author for the series, Becca McCoy. She's here to talk about her new book called The Year of Extraordinary Travel. So, welcome, Becca. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, let's go ahead and get started with the talk. So tell us a little bit about your book. So I was flipping through your book and I saw there were some incredible pictures and the stories behind the pictures were very interesting as well. But what was the real story, behind this book and behind your travels?
The year that I turned 40, I had a couple of other life changes all at once, and one singular opportunity to travel came my way, and I took it, and it was so invigorating and so inspiring that I started seeking out other opportunities to travel. It was just such a nice way to get out of my head and get back into living in the moment. And then I looked at the calendar and realized it wouldn't take much for me to do this for real every month for 1 year. And so I did that. I set the goal and I completed it. So it didn't start by design, but it ended by design. And then when the pandemic hit and my life as a performing artist changed drastically, I started to really think about what things in my life could create content for myself as a performer. I've always been an interpretive artist or a collaborative artist. And so I thought, well, I have this experience. I have this year of travel, which is already a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's dense, it's interesting. I'm an avid photographer. I have thousands, tens of thousands of photos from the experience. And so I started working with the St. Pete Press to put it into book form. And about 9 months later, birthed a book.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing how you were able to take those experiences and just create this amazing book that you have. And so you travel to a lot of countries and, even a few states here as well. So do you have a favorite country or state that you visited, or did you enjoy basically every place you went to?
Interesting. Yeah. Yes and yes. Each individual month became its own vignette, right? So each individual trip is its own story. And I have favorite moments from every single one of them. And I also view them kind of differently, even though they're part of this larger story arc. But hands down, my favorite was Thailand. And I'm very grateful that it was how the trip ended, because it's so powerful and poignant, and it has stayed with me. I think about Thailand several times a week and have for the years since I went, and how badly I want to go back.
Do you have a favorite state that you visited here?
Um, well, I think most of the states were first time visits, so that is kind of my favorite way to travel. But I would have to, I went to Alaska in December to chase the Northern Lights.
Oh,
And it was extraordinary, and they were extraordinary. And so I guess probably Alaska.
yeah. Wow. The Northern Lights is really something you need to see in person. So that's
Oh yeah, yeah. I wanted, now I'm like, okay, where else? I need to go to Canada. I need to go to Norway.
yeah. And I mean, even Thailand, like, I mean, I've always wanted to go to Thailand, I mean, I like Thai food. So,
Yeah,
that's like one
there's
excuse
Thai
to
food
go.
everywhere.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it was I tell people, like, I think why I loved Thailand so much is that it decentered it decentered Anglo culture, and yet there's enough English, there's that you can, I was alone, and I was able to travel easily. I wasn't intimidated. I was able to find my way around. I was able to communicate with people, and yet it was so different. And so it was nice to marry those two worlds of getting to go someplace where you are truly humbled as a human being, and yet able to function within the community and within the cities and the towns, enough to really feel like you're getting something valuable out of the experience. And so I think that was what it was, that balance of being so different and yet navigable.
Yeah, I mean, you're living the life everybody wants to live right now. I wanted to try. I love traveling, but like, I'm in school still, so kind of can't right now. But maybe in the future I might be able to do what you did.
Do it, and don't wait. Don't do this retirement age. Wait, if you have time, health, and money, do it. And some of my trips were very short. They were 2 nights because I needed to fit them into an actor weekend of a Monday and Tuesday. One trip was very large because I was taking my daughter to the other side of the planet, and that was its own thing. But I traveled for all different budgets, for all different time periods, all different places, and all of them were valuable in some way. All of them enriched me in some way. So as long as you have a little bit of discretionary funds and health and time, do it. Travel is one of the greatest gifts of living on Earth.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. So in your book you've taken so many pictures and you have so many stories in there, but was there a particular picture and story in your book that is your favorite, like, picture and memory, or, you just find interesting in general?
I hot air ballooned over the outback with my daughter when we went to Australia. And I was able to take pictures of the kangaroos because we were up above them. And hot air balloon, that was the first time I'd ever been hot air ballooning. And so when the burners are on, it's very, very loud. And then you get to the elevation you need to be, and the burners turn off, and it's so quiet. It's like, in Florida, when we have hurricanes, if you lose power, you're almost in a state of anti-sound because you're used to these ambient noises that we're not even aware of, the hum of a light bulb, the air handler. And when all of that is gone, it's so quiet. And that's how it was when the burners turned off. You were in this absolute silence. And you start early in the morning. You get there right before the sun rises. And so that particular morning, it was a full moon and a gorgeous sunrise, and it was so quiet. And then the kangaroos started waking up and were just bounding through the bush, and getting to photograph them from up above where they're not aware of you. And the sun is hitting their coats, and they're shining and glowing as they bound. It was just extraordinary. So I was really glad that I had a decent camera for that experience.
Yeah, that sounds like a dream come true, especially like getting to be above and getting like a how would you call it, like an aerial view, I
Yeah,
guess, of
yeah,
the kangaroos and of the land in general.
yeah.
That's amazing. So you said in your book that sometimes you traveled alone and then sometimes you traveled, with a friend. So which do you prefer, do you suggest, is traveling alone or traveling with someone?
It's funny. I'm in the process of adapting the book for a stage production that's happening in Florida in December, and I just wrote a passage about this last night for my first draft. The For me, again, like how each individual month was kind of its own story, its own little nugget within this larger experience. The same with traveling with people versus not with people. But I had 5 different travel companions that were my mom, my sister, what became my boyfriend, my daughter, and a best friend. those are 5 totally different kinds of relationships. You interact with those people in completely different ways. And whomever you're sharing an experience with co-authors that experience with you. And so they're all shaped because of who I was with, and they're intrinsically linked. And so I would recommend both, because I think that it is a very powerful part of your personal evolution to be comfortable truly alone. And when I traveled alone, I didn't share the experience with anyone. I didn't co-author the experience with anyone. And so the memories, the the interactions, all of that is truly mine. And the first trip I took alone was in January. So I started September to August. In January, I went to Key West by myself. And I had just, because I had gotten divorced in the year when I turned 40, I was alone on a New Year's Eve, or unattached on a New Year's Eve, for the first time since I was 17. And I like kind of sat in that space and thought, I want to be comfortable with myself. I've been partnered for the majority of my life. And so I started, sprinkling in these trips to take by myself. And when I decided to end the experience with a 1-year, kind of calendar finite date, I decided the last trip had to be done alone, so that it was something that I truly owned and created for myself, with myself.
Wow, that's powerful. I mean, that's really great. I mean, I wish I could travel alone. I mean, I'm a little hesitant to do it, because I normally travel with people or with
Mhm.
friends, but maybe I might try traveling alone. Like once I have the money to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but overall, did you learn anything, from your travels, about yourself, or, about life in general?
Mm, mm. That's good. One of the things that I'm exploring in the stage version of the show, is kind of the difference between recollection and memory. The difference between recalling an event, and like the kind of the empirical, fixed, rigid parts of an event versus your memory of an event, which changes and evolves as you do. So that's something that's really interesting. And I also tried to write the book with space for that. That's why it's not heavy on narrative. It's not a diary necessarily. It's more of these vignette storytelling, so that there's space to revisit the experiences and think about them in a different way, or feel something different about them, as I go. Sometimes it's hard, like if you reread your journals from the past and you're like, oh, I can't, I can't believe I thought that, or I was obsessed with that thing or whatever. And so I wanted to create something that had the give and take, that it could evolve with me as I looked back on it. I don't know. I think mostly just how much travel and allowing yourself to be humbled is an important part of how I wanted to continue moving forward with my life. That was really something that came out of that year.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And what advice would you give to someone who wants to travel by themselves, but they're a little intimidated by doing it? Like someone like me, for example.
Um, for example, a couple places I traveled to alone I had never been. Obviously Thailand was one, and that was a big leap of faith, because that's the other side of the planet. Key West I'd never been, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I just hopped on a ferry. I got a hotel that was walking distance. I was very comfortable there. I also traveled to Chicago alone because I had lived in Chicago 2 other times, but I had always been married. And so I wanted to go someplace that I was really familiar with from a new place in my life. So that's something that, if you're a little intimidated by the idea of like truly traveling alone, maybe go someplace that you're very familiar with. And the fact that you're alone is the new, and those are the fresh eyes that you'll get to see this familiar place through.
That's good. Yeah. Um, yeah, maybe then I might travel by myself one day. I don't know. I'll see how I'm feeling. If I'm feeling a little intimidated, maybe I might just take a friend first and then
Yeah.
see how it goes. But you mentioned that you have or were in the process of adapting the book into like a stage production.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little more about that? Like, what kind of production will it be?
Sure. Yeah. Well, because it's in Florida, so that's nice and close by. I've always been an actor. I was a professional actor since 1999, and I was doing a show when the pandemic shut the show down early. And most of 2020, we just kind of thought things would get back to normal, but we pivoted over to doing things on Zoom and posting things on YouTube. And like I said, the book came out of realizing that I didn't have content of my own, that I couldn't monetize on YouTube, my cabarets or things that I've done that people would have been familiar with, because I don't own the rights to the source material. And so I set out to think about creating source material, but at the time, theater was still in flux, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to make something theatrical out of it, especially because the photography was such an important element. And so the book and all of that was its own process. And then I was approached by a friend, Ward Smith, who runs Grand Central, the studio off of First Avenue South, and he asked if I was available in December to do a show, like kind of as a residency, or do a production that was original work. And I just jumped at the chance. A lot of the great things that I've accomplished in life have been yeses, where not necessarily something that I came up with, but this little voice in the universe says, hey, what about? And I'm like, yes. And so I started, I'm working with a collaborator, Vicky Daigneault, who's a brilliant director. I've known her since 2004 when I lived in Chicago the first time. And now we had both lived in Gulfport for a while. My parents still live in St. Petersburg. I currently live outside of Atlanta. But I'm coming down in December to do what is a fusion theatrical experience, which is something that I get really jazzed about. I've often done cabarets that are heavy on solo performance. And so this time I'm putting together a book reading with a theatrical performance. So there are elements of the show where I am reading directly from the book, because being read to is its own form of engagement. And it's something that goes all the way back to our childhoods, right? Like, we've been read to since we were babies, by our parents, by our babysitters, by our teachers. And the way that your imagination gets to take over, the way that you form a relationship with the words, is one type of engagement. When an actor is speaking, monologuing directly, that's its own type of engagement. Whether or not I have projections of the images and I'm asking you to look at what I want you to look at, versus letting your own mind conjure images, those are two different kinds of engagement. And so the stage production follows the experience through the 12 months. It's nice that it already had a beginning, a middle, and an end. But it combines reading from the book, telling stories that aren't in the book, and then also looking at all of it through the lens of being another year removed and another year through pandemic realities and how my life has changed. And and just kind of looking at the greater lessons through the filter of where I'm at yet another year beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go see it. I think that sounds really interesting. And, I loved your book as well. Do
Thank
you know
you.
do you know when exactly in December will it be? Like what
Mhm.
time around?
Yes, it's December 8th to the 18th at Studio Grand Central.
Okay, that's great. And
Thank-
I hope we can have you again and you could promote your stage production when it gets near the time. But I think those are all the questions I have for you today, Becca. So thank you
Okay.
so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure meeting you and getting to know more about you and your book. And we hope to have you on again soon. And good luck with your stage production. I think
Thank you.
it's going to
Thank
be
you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk more about it. Thanks.
yeah, no problem. And I think it's going to be as amazing as your book. I really,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So Becca's book is also available on the St. Petersburg Press website and on Amazon as well, if anyone is interested in purchasing it. But that's all for today. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you all again soon.